The Institute of Leadership and Management recognises great leadership as being multidimensional. We identify 5 dimensions: authenticity, vision, achievement, ownership and collaboration. We've broken down those 5 dimensions into 49 components, which enable us to organise our resources in such a way as to help individuals access the leadership development that is immediately relevant to them. This video introduces self-awareness, part of the dimension of authenticity.
So all about self-awareness today, because we're really interested in how well do we know ourselves. And some of the research that we do, and it often doesn't really matter what topic we're doing, we do see a big disconnect from what managers think they're doing and what the people who are managed think is going on. And one example of that is quite stark, I think. When we ask whether leaders show willingness to rethink their own point of view, you can see that 3/4 of us are a bit reluctant to do that. Now, that to me is a real insight into self-awareness, because the leaders would say, oh yeah, I rethink my point of view. And the people around them are obviously having a different view. Similarly, we asked, is there space for challenge? And you can see here that just only over half of teams create space for constructive challenge. So that's an awful lot of quiet people. And an interesting one, again, about being self-aware. When we make decisions, are we transparent about that? We just assume people understand why we've made the decision? And of course, there's a real degree of self-awareness in being able to explain a decision. And there's a lot of integrity involved with that, knowing that you've made the decision for the right reasons. And if you're able to be confident of that, it's a lot easier to explain why certain decisions have been made. We're real advocates at the Institute of experiential learning. Any of you who are familiar with the 70-20-10 view of learning will know that so much of our learning is done informally, it's done on the job, it's done by watching other people. And I think no more so the leadership and management. So many people tell us that they've learned great leadership from knowing and being in the company of great leaders and great managers. And similarly, you've often learned how not to do things because you've experienced poor leadership or poor management. And it's left you thinking, I'll never do that. I'll never do that when I'm in a position of leading or managing others. Again, going back to that perception gap, as it's being called, between what people think they're doing well and what the people around them think they're doing well, we'll see here that a lot of people seem to think their leaders and managers are in need of coaching or training. We do get some brilliant comments, brilliant insights from our research. And one of the things that we have noticed is that if people think their managers are trying to do their best, they are very supportive and very tolerant. It's when the individual manager is seen to be acting out of self-interest that we get the most criticism. So often you'll say, oh, it doesn't really know what they're doing, but they are trying. And there is such a goodwill, good feeling. And so I think today, this week, I'd urge everybody that to be kind not only to each other, but to your leaders and managers who are actually operating way outside of their normal comfort zone, and also learning a new skill set, which of course managing people that you don't see absolutely it is. We did find that favouritism was quite controversial, if you like, whereas if you are a favourite, and we all have our go-to people that we like to spend time with. Again, some other research of ours just recently published showed that how much we really value our colleagues and how important the relationships we have with our colleagues are. So when we're thinking about leaving a job, for example. But if you're not a favourite, if you're one of the people who are outside the sort of the inner circle, that's very different experience. That's being quite other. So whilst we should, of course, enjoy relationships with colleagues, do, again, all parts of self-awareness, be aware of those people that perhaps we're not automatically or immediately drawn to. So we're talking about authenticity, we're talking about self-awareness, and we often quote our companion Charles Hampden Turner because his definitions are obviously often marvelous, and this one particularly about authenticity is communicating with others what you think without guile or tactical cunning. And in order to be without guile and not to behave in a cunning manner, we have to be really, really clear about our own emotions, our own motivations for engaging in that communication. And of course, that absolutely is self-awareness. So self-aware leaders not only understand what they're doing and the contribution they make, and as I said, when I was talking about decision making a moment ago, if you know why you've made a decision and you think that that has been based on sound values that you will hold and you will own, it's so much easier to be open and honest with the people around you, because you do impact everybody around you as a leader, as a manager, all the time. I think another thing that our research consistently reveals is how watched we are, and how people look all the time that our actions match our words. So we want people to be self-aware. And of course, this week you've got so much time, so many people have to really reflect upon what keeps us going when we're working, how we motivate ourselves, how we interact with people when we're using different communication tools. So we will get real insights if we're observant and mindful about our strengths and what is motivating us, what keeps us going when you're by yourself in an office at home, in a bedroom, or not at home, but got other competing priorities for your attention and your time. But we will have strengths. We know when we can work best if we think about it. We'll know what works for us. We'll know what stresses us. We know where we're likely to procrastinate and put things off. And hopefully for many people, this sort of enforced home working will highlight areas that we're great at that we didn't even know about, because we've been so used to working in more traditional ways. And all of these insights enable us perhaps to manage our days better, because we know what works for us, better insights into when we're at our best. And then anybody who really works hard at being self-aware can only really do that if they appreciate the impact they have on others. I don't think it can be. Although I've heard some people talk about other people's lack of self-awareness, how you can be self-aware if you don't know what you're doing to other people. I think some of you will have heard where some people think that self-awareness is an excuse for poor behaviour. I'm very self-aware. I never listen to what anybody says. That's just me. So it's not just knowing, it's what you do with that knowledge and how kind you are, aware you are of what your self-awareness, your behaviour is doing to your colleagues and the people you're working with. So I said we have a leadership essential that summarises all the current knowledge and insights into a particular topic, and then we've broken that down. And for self-awareness, we've broken that down particularly into 3 sections that we think are the great ways of finding out about yourself. Knowing your personality, knowing your preferred leadership style, and being aware of emotional intelligence and what you can do about that. So let's start thinking about personality tests. So lots of you will have done personality tests. You might have done MBTI is probably the Myers-Briggs type indicator, where you get 4 initials that describe your personality type. So there are combinations of those 4, and you end up with different sort of dimensions, which gives 16 different sorts of supposed management style. When Myers-Briggs was first used, it was assumed that the best managers were ESTJ. They were extrovert, they were sensing, they were thinking, and they were judging, to use. A lot of this is actually based on Jungian psychology. Now, people will have different, you complete the questions yourself. They're self-administered for a start. So, of course, as research invariably shows, none of us like to think we're average. We always like to think we're above average. We always like to think we know slightly more than other people. I think this is explained really well in a book called The Art of Choosing by Sheena Iyengar. But nevertheless, we will, over time, be very consistent in how we complete these self-administered tests and the results. And that's what makes a person, most people assume or think that personality is relatively enduring, because we do sort of say the same. If, for example, we're an extrovert, we rather stay like that throughout our lives. So in terms of working at home, you have to really think about where you get your energy from. Where do you get your best ideas? So if you are somebody who needs to be in a room with other people talking in order to think, then you're going to find that you need so much more to be using video conferencing, to be using the phone. Know that if you're not talking to people, that you are actually going to be draining your energy, because of course for the extroverts amongst us, that's sort of like a battery recharge. Introverts, the thinkers, the people, as I often like to think, are just extroverts with judgment, but they will find that non-stop video conferencing, phone calls, is absolutely draining, because there's nowhere to go, is there, when you're on a video conference? The level of attention that you need to pay is so much higher than actually if you're in a room, because you can zone in and zone out. So do think about your energy. Do again think about how you like to make decisions, whether you're better making them on your own and sending them to somebody for to think about, to discuss, or whether you're happy making them in a big video conference call. I would encourage people to really limit where they can the conference calls with no video. They are even more tiring, because you're trying to read so much, or you have to read so much into tone of voice. Now, I will always advocate voice communication over written communication, especially in these difficult times, as it were. But don't underestimate how hard it is to try and listen, to try and pick up all your normal social cues that you get by looking at people from the tone of voice. And with the added complication, if you've got multiple people on the call, who's talking? And what you can't see often with a very difficult to see with a voice call is the reactions of people around them to what's being said. Of course, video conferencing can help a bit with that, because at least you're being able to pick up cues from other people. So do these online personality questionnaires. Do just enjoy reading about yourself. And whether or not you agree or disagree, it actually really doesn't matter, because what is important about this, it's a non-hierarchical way of expressing difference. So it's not better to be an extrovert or an introvert. It's actually about different ways of working. So do them, because they're just great tools for conversation, great insights. And of course, they are used extensively in recruitment. And it's the sort of thing you can really get brilliant about talking about yourself, because you're really evidencing insight. So don't be too worried if you think that these are labels and you reject labels. You don't have to accept the labels just because you know what they are. Is that really you? Ask people, honest people we put there, who you trust, that they have no agenda with their response to you. All they essentially want to do is help you get better at what you're doing. We all have a preferred leadership style. Now, this will have come about, and often I haven't read any research, but I often think how the impact that head teachers must have on young children, and the way that they run those first schools that you're part of. And if you've got somebody very autocratic, you then perhaps grow up thinking that that's what leadership and management is. But however or wherever the influences come from, we will have a preferred style. And one of the things I think it's interesting to think about is to think about something that was brilliant and really successful, and think about the role of leadership in that success. So instead of thinking about people who are all the things that, if you run a leadership seminar, I'll tell you that are great about Winston Churchill, or more recently Michelle Obama, you just think something happened, it was a great event. Where did leadership, how and where did leadership feature in that? management leadership everywhere as being it's been a new paradigm. Group them into sort of 6 groups. That initial very autocratic, you will do as I say. And it's an interesting, if we look now, the government's in isolation, because being a liberal democracy, but very, very reluctant to go to coercion. Well, let's ask people to self-isolate. Let's appeal to their willingness to self-regulate, because there's something about coercion that certainly here in the UK that we resist. Then a less perhaps coercive style of leadership will be somebody where you have all the answers and what you do. And I think this is a very old-fashioned view of leadership. You have a single person with a set of personal attributes, a great vision, a plan, and what they then do is mobilize and bring people with them. And if going back to what I was talking about finding a great example of when something's been successful, was it really about just one person being brilliant, or was it about a lot of people being brilliant together? Your style of leadership might be more affiliative, where you actually rely on building relationships. And I think that research, again, that I mentioned earlier, where people were telling us how much they valued their colleagues and how important their colleagues were in terms of staying in the job that they're in. That's very strong affiliation. So leaders that can create environments where people enjoy being together, working together, essentially like-minded people, are going to have, that is a particular style, very people oriented. And then your style might be more democratic, where you actually just prefer to ask people what they think, take a consensus, and then you get buy-in. Great effective leadership style, but it's not relying on those personal bonds, it's actually relying on everybody's voice being heard, everybody having a contribution. Or then again, when I talked about leaders, and when you look at people who you admire as leaders, often very high standards for themselves, very high level of motivation, self-motivation. If we need anything at the moment, it's with regard to work, and maybe more widely, it's that ability to keep on going, to keep motivating ourselves. So if we do know that we love to admire people, or we need encouragement from others, or we need to be democratic, just harness that, use it, know yourself and know what works best for you. And then finally, we've grouped here the sort of leadership styles that we would consider coaching. It's when you're trying to bring out the best in people. It's a relationship. It's about believing in people. And of course, works brilliantly. One-to-one phone call, on one-to-one Zoom call, Skype call. Do take this opportunity to coach and be coached. And finally, another aspect that we see as important is of emotional intelligence. That being able to understand how you're feeling, know that you're going to feel down, know that you're being somewhat more irritable than usual. Think about what's causing that. Be just as attuned to other people. As I say, in any of our advice we give about managing people you're not seeing, try and, these people, hopefully, know what becomes not normal for them. Know whether their emails are longer or shorter. Know whether they're logging on late and leaving early. What is unusual for that person? And that's emotional intelligence. That's knowing how you're feeling, but absolutely tapping in to how other people are feeling as well. So we've included the 5 components there of emotional intelligence. As I said, all our resources available. They're freely available this week for each of the components. There's also, and I'm hoping that we're going to have people being interested in enough to say, well, if I'm self-aware, I'll have a go at the scorecard and I'll see if I meet the standard. And then you'll get obviously an email saying, well done, standard met, and then a badge in the email that you can use as you wish.